So the run for EG is over, and in my predictions in preseason, I had predicted Evil Geniuses to not even make top four, at least, for the spring split. And realistically, I thought I was mostly correct about the analysis about Evil Geniuses and how there was a little bit too much craziness. There was a little bit of inconsistency from Deathly in the bot lane. And I just didn't really understand the entire roster construction of this team itself. Now, with that said, as we go into summer and we started to see that this team had ballooned to be a really fucking good team, I think it's worth to say that Jiizuke is so good that it's worth building an entire play style around. And that's actually kind of absurd to say when you think about it, because his play style, as many have noted in the past, it's very erratic, very sporadic, and it seems like initially that it's unreliable. But once you get more into the weeds of it, it actually seems like he has a plan that he wants to do, and as long as his team is willing to support him, then he's going to be a phenomenal player. You just have to buy into his play style. Now, I do criticize Jiizuke a lot, and this video isn't about me turning a new leaf and saying that he's a fantastic player or I think his play style is actually, fantastic or the best. I still don't like his play style. I still think there are major flaws with him. But I think it's very impressive how he both has been able to shore up his game quite a bit, but also particularly because Evil Geniuses have been able to kind of point the gun at the enemy, so to speak, right, rather than at themselves. So with that said, if you look at Evil Genius's style itself, it has massively shifted as the weeks went on by with Jiizuke in the lineup and with a stronger ADC as well too. And you can see this style in the fact that they can basically do a 1-3-1 constantly, to where Jiizuke is on the other side of the map. You have Impact also on the other side of the map. And by the way, you do see Impact playing far more aggressive than previous iterations of, Impact before, over on Team Liquid or over on Cloud9. It's quite refreshing to see that he's able to pull out the playstyle that I always knew that he had, but I think that's also been enabled by Jiizuke because he knows that, well, if I get got, then my homeboy on the other side of the map is able to do some fucking damage to the towers and maybe get an inhibitor. So it just kind of reinforces every other aspect on the map. And not only that, I think it's very impressive that Jiizuke is able to do this while also in a meta to where vision is actually very limited from previous iterations of League of Legends, with fucking Sightstone, and you have Tracker's Knife and all that. Like, that was the era to where split push was easier to do because you had more vision to cover, the weak side, the person that's splitting by themselves. So not only that, I think also too, Jiizuke often gets an advantage to where now two people do have to check him in the bot lane or the top lane or whatever, and then the main 4 squad or the 3 squad ends up getting another objective on the map. And I want to make the comparison because this had made me think of this, video itself, was that I think Huni and Jiizuke actually play very similarly when it comes to the laning phase specifically, and the fact that they both play very greedy. They constantly basically check you to say, I don't know, is my jungler here? Like, you tell me, but I'm going to go for this skill shot or I'm going to go for this trade. And you don't actually know if it's a ridiculously dumb trade or if my jungler is actually here. Now, with Jiizuke, it's a little bit more difficult to tell because, well, I mean, that is the center of the map. So theoretically, the jungler is actually closer to Jiizuke than it would be Huni in the top lane. I think that's partially the biggest difference as to why it works more for Jiizuke than it does for Huni. Also, that's kind of reminiscent to the classical playstyle that Faker plays, which is, he plays very aggressive and in your face, and people initially didn't even know how to respond to that, and that's why he was so good, because he was able to kind of call your bluff essentially for years and years until people started to figure out that, oh, his jungler probably isn't here, or I have some of these wards against Faker, so therefore he can't actually bluff me as easily. And so with that, though, I think Huni and Jiizuke play a very aggressive style and a very like check yourself type style. And like we can see these types of similarities between these players. And for one big advantage, I think that Jiizuke has over every other player in the mid lane, for the most part, is that he plays very EU style. Now, when I say EU style, people would be like, well, what really is the big difference between EU players versus North American players, right? Everyone always just cites, well, EU mid laners are just better, right? They're just better. But no one's actually broke it down in maybe a quantifiable way of why they're better. The reason why they're better is because they take actual risks. That's the main difference between EU and North America, at least when it comes to the mid lane. And you could even think of mid laners that have stayed here for quite a while, and I'm pointing at fucking Jensen and I'm pointing at Bjergsen too in the past, is that their style has become more complacent and less willing to take risks. And that's where Jiizuke kind of shines, is that it's so unorthodox and it's so, at least quote unquote, crazy to the other mid laners, because they aren't used to the kind of weird plays of like a 50-50. Why would you take a 50-50? That doesn't make any sense, right? At least from the North American mid laner mindset. But that's the style that you see in EU, which gets that, crazy mid laner ahead. That's why it gets a caps ahead. So this is what I essentially think Jiizuke has brought over from EU, and it's very refreshing to see, and it's great that he's able to actually hold on to that identity as he's kind of been molded within North America and North American team culture. So I think Jiizuke, on top of that, is, I think, I don't want to say he is the first, but he's the only one that I can think of right now, the first European to ever teach an NA team how to side lane properly. That's insane. That's such an insane accomplishment. It's fucking absurd, because North America has traditionally not known how to side lane since like Darshan or Zion Spartan, right? Back in CLG days. And this is absolutely crucial for North America's growth. And I would say actually that Jiizuke has had a large impact on how the entire North American landscape and all of the teams play to this day in terms of how the meta has developed. And you could see that although the global meta has shifted more towards top lane or more towards mid lane in terms of the solo lanes and whatnot, just worldwide, but I think also too that's been enforced by specifically Jiizuke, enforcing you to actually check him over in the side lane, because otherwise he's going to create fucking massive damage. And to a certain extent, Perks has also done that as well too. And I'm not trying to snub Peter Dunn, the head coach, or Artemis here. I think they've done phenomenal work in terms of maybe aligning the rest of the team when it comes to the certain quirks and nuances of Jiizuke's playstyle. I think they've done that fantastically, and I don't think that you can have a player like this without having a phenomenal coaching staff. So I do want to point that out, but I think Jiizuke, because he initially brings this style, and he also has a very stubborn playstyle, and you could see that, and that's one of the things of why I don't like Jiizuke's playstyle, but we're speaking about the positives here. This is a quintessential, landmark keystone thing of what Jiizuke is, or what he brings to North America. Now, I also think similarly, to draw the comparison back to Huni again, Huni was praised for his outside game knowledge. You always hear, a lot of other teammates say that, yeah, Huni's really smart about the game, especially in reviews and things. He'll say really smart shit about how we should restructure our play style, or we should have done this play or whatnot. And along with his communication style and how he's very efficient, but he's also very smart about his communication. I mean, just dude, go look at fucking Jiizuke and remember that play with Danny where Danny got the pentakill against 100 Thieves. Go back and look at that play. I'll link it down in the description below so that you could hear the comms because they released the comms. And I mean, Jiizuke was fucking on point in terms of his comms. He was guiding Danny to actually tell him maybe what plays that he should make, keep the rookie kind of cool. He kind of shut up to where, it was very micro intensive for Danny to actually outplay the enemy and whatnot. And then, of course, Impact 2 has very good comms, and that has been touted historically throughout all of his teams. It's probably why he gets paid the mega fucking bucks. And, famously too, of course, I guess maybe that's why Huni gets paid an insane amount anyways, even though I still don't see the reason, but, neither here nor there. But yes, now we see that Jiizuke is very effective when it comes to communication within the entire game. So you have to praise him for that as well, especially considering that it would be incredibly valuable when you have a rookie on your team. So although I still do dislike Jiizuke's style just from a fundamental core perspective because I don't think he's very malleable in that sense, I do believe that if you can fit him into, the round peg into the peg hole, then it's all going to work out fine, and you're going to have a really solid piece. You're going to have one of the strongest mid laners, in fact, in the entire West. But it's just if you can adopt maybe his nuance or his ideas about the game. But essentially, I think that's why it makes him so strong, is because he has such different ideas about the game. So I do really want to praise Jiizuke, and I do think that he has his stubborn moments, kind of like Huni in a way, but he's able to be shaped around a little bit better. And that's why I think Jiizuke is actually, the new Huni, but just in fucking mid lane.